Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov chess channel, and welcome to our London system series. So in this series, we're following this very nice opening from White's perspective, and today we're continuing with the London system with some traps that Black can prepare against you, because there are some dubious lines that Black can choose, and maybe you can make one mistake and lose the game immediately. I think these traps that Black can prepare are not regular openings, they're irregular, so you should punish them because they are traps. They are very good because we evaluate always the trap strength by the possible continuation. For instance, if you play a trap and then your opponent doesn't fall for it, does this trap mean that you will lose the game immediately, or do you have still a continuation? Because I think it's very important to have then a good continuation when you prepare a trap if your opponent doesn't fall for it. So that's why I think these lines that I wanted to show you today are really irregular, and you should play a calm game. You shouldn't fall into this trap for one or two moves in the continuation, but still you have, I think, a decent game. And the first trap that I wanted to show you is in an accelerated London system after the move d4, and the opponent responds with the move d5. So we can play our accelerated London system, and your opponent can choose now really a tricky line. It's the move h5, and the move h5 is a preparation to play f6 and g5, and then maybe afterwards h4 to trap your bishop, because okay, your bishop in some occasions is exposed by some potential knight attacks, knight to f6, maybe knight to h5, but still this h5 move really breaks the common principles in chess, so that in my opinion this line is bad for Black. I think a top grandmaster would punish this move immediately, but what you don't want to do is to play now the next move e3, because after e3 it leads now into a really uncomfortable game, because your opponent has to move e5 and your bishop is going to get trapped, because after d takes e5 we still have g4, bishop to g3, and then h4, and I think it's game over. So if you take with the bishop, the same thing happens. Still we have f6 after bishop to f4, g5, bishop to g3, and then h4. So but when we think about this more, we should really apply the basic principles in chess. First of all, what we can notice, this move h5 is of course a preparation of a flank attack with f6 g5. So in my basics in chess series, if you have followed my series how to play chess in an opening, in the middle game, in the end game, it's really obvious that we should immediately challenge the center, because after move h5 a common flank attack is best to be met with a central counter attack. So that's why my recommendation here is to play simply c4. And okay, what Black does, maybe developing normally with the knight to f6, with knight to f3, e6, and then we can play e3, and it's perfectly fine. After bishop to d6 we can even play something like, I don't know, bishop to g5, staying with this very annoying pin against the knight, develop maybe knight to c3, bishop to e2, queen to c2, and even queenside castline thing would be a nice preparation. The evaluation is +1 here for White. Of course I cannot explain you every move, what happens if Black now does this, if what happens if Black does now this, but still I think from this point on you should really have a comfortable game. But Black can also play here after potential maybe c4 move is the move d takes c4. I think it can be met again with some knight to f3 ideas. We shouldn't allow our opponents to continue with the breakthrough with the e5. If Black plays c5, e3, c takes d4, bishop to c4 is also a possibility, because d takes e3 is not a possibility. You get a nice tactical shot, bishop to f7. But as I said, you shouldn't study always these openings, what happens this, if that happens. Sometimes you should really apply the basics principle in chess, and I think in this particular line, let's go back to after the move h5, a potential flank attack is best to be met with central counter attack. Of course it's the move c4, d takes c4 can also be met with queen to a4, and then take out the pawn, really fixing the center, e3, and healthy developing move. So it's perfectly fine. So another tap that you can see sometimes is after move d4, d6, then bishop to f4, and our opponent plays a flexible c6 move, which is really a preparation to play something like queen to c7 and then e5. But it's not so good, I think, for Black to go into this queen to c7 e5 lines, because your bishop is always on this diagonal. We'll analyze, of course, in the continuation of the series some ideas of queen to b6, early queen to b6 ideas, and basically the best moves like c5. We'll come to that part, what happens if that happens, if your opponent challenges after the move queen to b6, the pawn on b2. But here I think the problem of this particular line line is a potential e3 move, and the potential e3 move can again be met with the move bishop to g5, g5 attacking the bishop on f4. If you take, then you get this tactics queen to a5, and you lose the bishop on g5. So, but still, this g5 move is not so dangerous. Bishop to g3 can be played, and your opponent will have to then continue, I think, with the common h5 move, but it can be still met with h3. Then we still normal develop here, knight to f3, bishop to d3, maybe something like knight from b to d2, queen to e2, and queenside castling would be also a nice possibility, because I don't think that black can really attack both sides. The main idea of the move c6 would be a potential breakthrough here with the move b5, but if your opponent gets on the queen side, gets also on the king side, then he leaves, of course, also a little bit his center unprotected. We can then maybe afterwards advance the pawn to e4 and maybe to play e5. But here you see, you shouldn't fall for this bishop to g5 idea. If you maybe try to develop with knight to f3 to prevent this g5 idea, then black could play a very annoying bishop to g4 move, and again after e3, again the same thing will happen. g5, still the evaluation is much better here for white, but still I wouldn't love to play this game now from white's perspective. After move bishop to g3, then now h5, and this bishop is supported. We could try also something like f5. It could be really tricky here for white. As I said, in the continuation, if you see that your opponent is doing this c6 lines, then I think we should go simply knight from b to d2 and preparing here e4 moves. Your opponent could play maybe knight to f6, but we can really play aggressively e4, or we could play a calm game with e3. If our opponent plays something like queen to c7, then knight to f3, e5, and still I think we can even play bishop to g3, or play something like d takes e5. After d takes e5, you see here you can immediately take out the pawn. But if your opponent even prepares this move further with knight from b to d7, then again bishop to d3 or h3, the normal London system move, hiding with our bishop here and staying on this long diagonal and attack against the queen on c7. So let's go back. As I said, I think here it's not so dangerous, but you could fall for some tactical ideas as knight to f3, bishop to g4, then e3, again g5 you cannot take, bishop to g5, bishop to f3, queen to f3, and again queen to a5 will happen, and you lose the bishop. So be careful, but these are really bad lines for black, so they are irregular traps. I would love to call them irregular traps. So if you play this next couple of moves very good, I think you have a decent game and you can win games very easily and very effectively. Just sometimes you should also consider it in some other openings. When you see that your opponent is making an irregular move, always think about the basic principles in chess. Like in this first example, when your opponent played the flank attack is best to be met with the central counterattack. Here also, if our opponent plays here very early with the bishop, or he is at least is trying to do this after move c6, it's time to prevent this idea, knight from b to d2, or we can play our normal London system setup with c3, e3, bishop to d3, maybe something like knight to d2, knight to f3. We're waiting a little bit, don't get into some tactical possibilities here with g5. Still, as I said, black doesn't have so many good opportunities, but this trap I think you should be really familiar with, and don't fall for this and continue to play our very nice London system. So okay, I hope that you realize these ideas, and I hope that you enjoy this video. If you want to study the London system more, check out my whole series. Here's the link from the beginning. If you want to study really hard, please watch the series from the introduction video, part 1, part 3, part 4, and so on. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.